Hey everyone, stay tuned until the very end of this video for a special announcement. You'll know when it happens because I'll be wearing this shirt again. Alright, take it away, me. With a new season of Steven Universe underway, the show continues its trend of being heavier than a blue whale sitting on top of an aircraft carrier sitting on top of a bathroom scale. But I've gotta say, in the new episodes, I am absolutely appalled at the Homeworld Gem's treatment of our favorite human gem hybrid. And I know that plenty of you have been too. Frankly, this injustice has gone on long enough, and I can't take it anymore. Something must be done. I'm Jacob with Channel Frederator, and it's time for me to lawyer up, put on my fake attorney's badge, and step up to the defense of the accused, Steven Universe, also known as Rose Quartz. And I'm here not only to clear my client's name, but also hopefully to figure out once and for all who shattered Pink Diamond. The badge won't stay straight, so I'm gonna be taking it off for the rest of the episode, but I'm still a lawyer. This episode of Cartoon Conspiracy is gonna have some pretty hefty spoilers for the last few episodes of Steven Universe. So if you haven't caught up to the end of the episode Lars Head, make sure you go do that. And then you can come back here to indulge in this legitimate, in-universe conspiracy. Seriously, it goes all the way to the top. Possibly, maybe, I don't know, that's what we're here to figure out today. For those of you who are still here, you probably know what's going on, but for those of you who don't, here's the abridged version. Pink Diamond was a member of the Great Diamond Authority, the most powerful figures of Homeworld. Sometime a long time ago, she was shattered, and as far as we know, Steven's mother Rose was the culprit of this war crime. That's what we thought at least, until Steven, in Rose's place, was put on trial on Homeworld for shattering Pink Diamond. During the trial, Steven's legal counsel, a Zircon to be specific, absolutely blew the lid off of this conspiracy in one of the latest episodes. And then as part of a, let's call it the cross-examination, Yellow Diamond promptly poofed her. And now it looks like Zircon is Zirgone. Better get your booing in now because I was saving that one. I thought of that like a week and a half ago and I'm still super proud of it. We'll get to the implications of Zircon's poofing later on. But amidst all the chaos, I couldn't help but notice that Yellow Diamond never officially adjourned the trial, so as far as this Earth lawyer is concerned, court is still in session, y'all. So today, we're gonna do things just a little differently. Since Pink Diamond's murder is such a whodunit in this show, we're going to take a closer look and see if we can't come to any conclusions ourselves. Usually in a criminal case like this, we'd want to find things like direct physical evidence in order to back up our claims. But since this murder took place over 5,000 years ago, we won't really be able to do that. So the way we're going to do this is base our arguments on mostly circumstantial evidence. That is to say, evidence through which things can be inferred and, if supported, can be used to come to a specific conclusion. The difference between direct and circumstantial evidence is the difference between a witness testifying that they saw me rob a bank and that same witness testifying that they saw me running from the bank wearing a mask with a comical sack of money with a $sign on it. In court, this kind of evidence can still be pretty damning, but not unless it's supported by other pieces of evidence to establish guilt. By the way, representing myself for a second, I can assure you that I have not stolen any large sums of money in the last month-ish. Anyway, with each suspect we'll look at today, we're going to focus mainly on three pillars of circumstantial evidence. These three things also serve as a well-known shorthand in order to establish guilt in the legal system. These three things are means, how was the crime committed, motive, what was the reasoning behind it, and opportunity, when could the crime have occurred. Keep in mind that in the real world, simply establishing these three things isn't really enough to convict somebody in a case of criminal law. Ideally, a guilty verdict can only be passed when the prosecution is able to prove the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And sometimes establishing these three things just isn't enough. But for our sake today, it should be more than enough. So before we start examining anything, let's first establish the scene of the crime as described by Zircon in her frantic mumbling. Right off the bat, let's establish as many things as we can about this crime. Firstly, one variable we can establish is our moment of opportunity. Based on eyewitness testimony, Pink Diamond was shattered after having just stepped off of her palanquin. After taking a few steps, Rose reportedly attacked Pink Diamond from the front, which seems to be a fair place to attack since Pink Diamond's gem appears to be on her waist. Seems open and shut, right? Why am I even here? Well, of course, it's not quite that simple. As Zircon astutely points out, at the time of the shattering, rose quartz had already been a recognized threat for hundreds of years, and pink diamond traveled with no other quartz soldiers, so how could Rose have infiltrated and gotten so close to pink diamond without any hindrance from pink diamond's entourage? Yellow diamond claims that pink diamond's entourage saw Rose shatter pink diamond, and yet none of them saw her approach? Not even the sapphires, who can see into the future? So yeah, there are a lot of points here that are sketchy at best. But while we can and will question the identity of the culprit, there doesn't seem to be much reason to doubt this moment of opportunity. So for now, we'll assume that other than the culprit, this is pretty much how it went down. Next, let's examine the means. How was pink diamond shattered? What weapon was used? If we're to assume that the defendant Rose is indeed the one who shattered pink diamond, then logic dictates that her sword must be the murder weapon, right? After all, Eyeball has gone on record before saying that the thing she remembers most about Rose is her sword, heavily implying that this is what she saw when pink diamond was shattered. And furthermore, during the trial, Blue Diamond seems pretty insistent that a sword was the murder weapon. But there is one massive problem with this. As far as we know, Rose's sword was designed specifically to slice through the bodies of gems, but never to destroy them, let alone shattering a diamond. This is all coming from what Bismuth told Steven. Bismuth, who at the time was perfectly sound of mind and had no reason at all to deceive Steven. So it seems like Bismuth's words are the most trustworthy when it comes to Rose's weaponry. Also, keeping Bismuth in mind, Steven said that Rose probably had to use the breaking point, a weapon made by Bismuth whose sole purpose is to destroy gems. But Bismuth again contradicts this, claiming that the weapon was never used and that Rose said she would never use it. But with all of this talk about a weapon, we can't forget that Blue Diamond didn't say it was Rose's sword that shattered pink diamond, just that it was a sword, which might serve to broaden our horizons slightly. Especially since we can't be sure that Eyeball knows what Rose's sword looks like either. So for now, it seems like our murder weapon is a sword, but probably not Rose's sword. So now we have our means and our moment of opportunity, a sword in front of the palanquin with Colonel Mustard. But what about motive? This is one of those mysteries where pretty much anybody who could have been at the scene of the crime is a prime suspect. So let's run down the list and see if we can understand any possible motives. First up, the defendant, Rose Quartz. Now before today, we have talked about how Rose could have corroborated in some sort of act of martyrdom on Pink Diamond's part. Check out the defense's previous case for this argument here. And you may think that it might be a conflict of interest for me to defend Rose in this case, which, I don't know, depending on how you want to read my last theory, maybe. But keep in mind that the defense's previous argument also suggests that Pink Diamond may have never actually been shattered in the first place. And it could be possible that she is still alive in another form, but I digress. If we're to assume that Rose acted alone and there was no cooperation or knowledge of the act on Pink Diamond's part, the defense concedes that Rose absolutely had the motive to do so. It would appear that, like the rest of the Great Diamond Authority, Pink Diamond held a stranglehold on Earth, and the only way to secure the planet's freedom was to shatter her. However, based on Bismuth's statements and Zircon's argument in the trial, it just doesn't make sense for Rose to have been the one to shatter Pink Diamond. Neither the means nor the opportunity quite add up. Now, we'll admit that Garnet did confirm Rose's guilt to Steven at the end of the episode Bubbled, but Garnet has proven herself before to be somewhat of an unreliable source, often protecting Steven from things she doesn't think he should know. What could she be protecting Steven from? I don't know, but Garnet's not the one on trial here. Moving on from Rose Quartz, there's always the distinct possibility that the true culprit is actually someone we've never met. And while I feel the obligation to mention this possibility, the defense would also like to throw this possibility out the window on the grounds that would be dumb. I'm talking from like a storytelling perspective here. Establishing this massive murder mystery over the course of multiple seasons and then resolving it with a character we've never met and therefore have no investment in would just feel weird and probably cheapen the rest of the mystery. Don't get me wrong, it's definitely a possibility, it would just be dumb. Alright, who's next? Speaking of people we've never met, here we have arguably the most powerful, most prominent, most absentist diamond there is, White Diamond. Now, we know so amazingly little about White Diamond that we can hardly say anything to her involvement in this crime. Though it is worth noting that of all of the diamonds, White Diamond appears to be the highest rank and would absolutely be able to dismiss Pink Diamond's entire entourage for a private audience. Or dismiss Pink Diamond's entire entourage to murder her and then cover it up. Her absence at the trial is also suspicious, to say the least. But since we don't know much else about her, we can't say much else about her. We can't even talk about things like motive without just gesticulating wildly. When I was writing the script, I tried to write down just speculating wildly, but then it auto-corrected to gesticulating wildly, and I'm like, yeah, whatever, that works too. Working our way through the diamonds, what does Blue Diamond have to say for herself? Well, pretty much everything I said about White Diamond being able to pull rank and cover things up would also probably apply to Blue and Yellow Diamond as well, so there's that. But Blue Diamond also appears to be the one who is the most genuinely remorseful about Pink Diamond's passing. In episodes like Steven's Dream and That Will Be All, we see Blue Diamond still openly grieving. And what's more, she does this when she believes herself to be alone. If she only pretended to feel remorse to keep up appearances, why would she choose to grieve in solitude? Furthermore, Blue Diamond doesn't seem to have the same lust for power as some of the other diamonds do. We'll get to her soon. So for the moment, her motive remains a mystery. While it's true that Blue Diamond took to overseeing things like Pink Diamond's human zoo, that seemed more like an act of coping rather than an intended end result of shattering Pink Diamond. However, there is the matter of Blue Diamond's outburst about the sword, which is a little strange. Blue Diamond is definitely the most emotionally volatile of the two that we've met so far, but her breaking point seemed to be when Steven mentioned the breaking point, at which point she cries out,
"It was a sword!" You shattered her with a sword.
With that kind of conviction, we can't help but believe her, but how does she know that? I mean, yes, it's possible that she thinks that the breaking point is just the name of a sword, but as we know, the breaking point is not a sword. And if she had just heard about this sword through eyewitness accounts, would it be worth getting so broken up about? Could this actually mean that she was at the scene? We've seen before that others, namely Steven/Rose, possess the ability to see the world through Blue Diamond's eyes. Is it possible that the opposite is also true and that Blue Diamond observed Pink Diamond's shattering through someone else's eyes? It's impossible to tell at this point. And because of these missing pieces, I can't say in good faith that she's guilty. Meanwhile, we have Yellow Diamond, who at this point looks to be the most guilty person who's ever been guilty of anything. Seeing as once Zircon mentioned the possibility of a diamond being the culprit, Yellow Diamond responded by poofing both Zircon attorneys. On one hand, that doesn't seem like something an innocent person would do. It's suspicious at best, especially considering the rush that Yellow Diamond appeared to be in to just end the trial and execute Rose. But on the other hand, how would you feel if you were just accused of the murder of your sister, or however the diamonds see each other? I can tell you that I too would find it pretty hard to keep my composure, that's for sure. As far as motive goes, Yellow Diamond seems to be driven primarily by power and authority. So if we were to speculate, it's possible that Yellow Diamond could have shattered Pink Diamond because she questioned Pink Diamond's allegiance. Or she could have just shattered her because fewer diamonds means that she could stand to gain more power. Simple motives, yes, but Yellow Diamond's character seems to support them. So far, every character we've looked at doesn't seem to quite fit all three of our conditions. While Rose definitely has the motive, her sword can't shatter gems, and putting her at the scene of the crime doesn't make any sense. And if we're to assume that the murder weapon is a sword, we can't be sure if either of the diamonds are even proficient with them. And as far as motive goes, while Yellow Diamond may have one, it's a bit harder to say that Blue Diamond does. But with all of that said, there is one suspect who checks all three boxes. One suspect who we can make the best case for being the true culprit. Of course, we're talking about Pearl. Our Pearl. Again, if the weapon is indeed a sword, we only know of one other gem who is particularly proficient with them, Pearl. And while we can't be sure if her swords can shatter gems, this seems to be the best lead we're gonna get. And while it's true that diamonds are pretty tall, I don't think that Pearl would have much of a problem reaching Pink Diamond's gem to shatter it. After all, she's proven time and time again that she's got mad ups. Mad ups, is that the phrase? Big ups? Pearl jump good. What about placing her at the scene? Well, that's surprisingly easy. Of any type of gem, pearls are the most likely to be overlooked by other gems, because to them, they hardly qualify as people. Pearls are decoration. Pearls are servants. And who better to slip past any guard than she who is already invisible? And furthermore, since pearls are hardly considered people in the caste system of Homeworld, if Pearl were to shatter Pink Diamond of her own accord, it's possible that the Homeworld gems would assume and parrot the fact that Rose shattered Pink Diamond, not feeling the need to clarify that it was her Pearl that actually did it. Or maybe the narrative was changed because of how embarrassing it would be for any gem to be destroyed by a pearl, let alone a diamond. As for motive, well, pearls would be pretty much the same as roses, except it would make more sense. After all, which of the crystal gems has shown in the past to make rash, self-destructive decisions? Pearl. Who would be the most likely to resort to an extreme in order to prove their allegiance to Rose? Pearl. Who was the bad guy in Battlefield Earth? Pearl. Wait, what was I talking about? Pearl has kept her backstory intentionally vague, which doesn't exactly help either. If Pearl was the true culprit, however, it would explain why Garnet was so eager to shift the blame to Rose in Bubbled. It seems like it would be easier for Steven to accept his biological mother, with whom he doesn't really share any sort of personal, intimate connection, as the real guilty party. But if he were to find out that Pearl, one of the most prominent mother figures of his life, was actually the one who shattered Pink Diamond, that could cause irreparable amounts of damage and fracture the relationship of the crystal gems as we know them now. It's for these reasons that I must say that based on the information we have now, you must accept that Pearl shattered Pink Diamond. As for my client Rose, if the blade fits, you must acquit. But between you and me, I may not be the ace attorney I'd have you believe. So who do you think shattered Pink Diamond? Do you think we'll get a definitive answer this season? And for those of you who are all caught up on the series, how do you feel about Lars? I don't know how, but Rebecca Sugar and company have made me do a complete 180 on that dude in like 4 episodes. Be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and also be sure to let us know of any conspiracies you'd like us to take a look at in the future. Until then, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Channel Frederator if this is your first time here, and don't forget to click the little bell icon next to the subscribe button to become part of our notification squad. And remember, Frederator loves you. Hey, still there? Awesome. Have you ever thought to yourself, well, golly gee, I wish there was a way I could tell everybody about my conspiracies about cartoons? Well, you weirdly specific dreamer, now's your chance, because much like last year, we're holding a contest to add another host to our roster of conspirators alongside Justin and myself. Don't worry, nobody's leaving the show, we're not going anywhere. This contest will run from June 29th to July 30th. You'll have a full month to email us at FrederatorConspiracy@gmail.com with a video of yourself telling us why you think you should be the next host for Cartoon Conspiracy. So take out your camera, put on your tinfoil hat, and get theorizing. A link to the official rules will be provided in the description down below should you feel like perusing them. Though we will tell you up front that a tinfoil hat is not a mandatory requirement. They are cool though. And remember, once more with feeling, Frederator loves you.